What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weer. I love talking about movies, and we have made it to the end of the final month in 2024. That's right, December of 2024 is just about to end, and since December is coming to an end, it's time to do what we've done on this channel every month this year, and that is take a look back at all of the brand new movie releases that I had a chance to see in the month of December 2024 and rank them from worst to best. Now, you guys know this isn't just about my list, it's about your list as well, so I'd love to know what you guys had a chance to see in December of 2024 and how you would rank it from worst to best. So let me know in the comment section down below what you saw and how you would rank it. With that said, if this is the first time you're finding my channel, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button, check out all the different content that I have. Maybe you like ranked lists like this, or maybe you like movie reviews, Blu-ray talk. I've got a little bit of everything on my channel, and I'd love for you to be part of the conversation. Finally, I want to say that if you're looking for my top 10 best or worst of the entire year so far, I promise those videos are coming. I just haven't had a chance to film them yet. My personal life has been really busy with the holidays and kids, and so I will get to all of my top 10 lists for the entire year. Those will be coming sometime in the next week or so. I promise they are coming. Stay tuned for them. But again, that's a nice thing about the subscribe button. If you hit that subscribe button, you will be notified when I drop new videos. All right, guys, let's rank December of 2024 from worst to best. Alright guys, so I saw 13 brand new films in December of 2024. 6 of them actually released in December, the other 7 released throughout the year, but I always use like the last 2 months of the year to sort of fill in movies that I've missed throughout the year. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that if you want more content on the movies we're about to talk about, yes, I'll talk about them here, but if you want more in-depth thoughts, I did quick reactions after each one of these films. They're all on my YouTube page now, and I've done full reviews for most of these movies. So again, if you want more content, you can check there. And the other thing I should say is that the only movie I didn't get to in December of 24 before making this video was the film A Complete Unknown. That's the Bob Dylan biopic, so if you saw it, let me know if it's worth checking out. I'm not the biggest musical biopic fan, and I'm also not the biggest fan of Timothée Chalamet, so for those reasons, I was like, I'll catch it when it's streaming down the road. But again, let me know if it's worth my time. All right, guys, with that said, let's get into number 13, the worst of the worst that I saw in December of 24, and that is Kraven the Hunter. Kraven the Hunter is Sony's third outing into the Spider-Man adjacent universe this year alone. Earlier this year, we got Madam Web, and that, of course, was an absolute dumpster fire of a film. Then, in October, we got Venom 3, The Last Dance, and that was a dumpster fire of a film. But I actually had some hope going into Kraven the Hunter. Kraven is one of my favorite characters from Spider-Man lore. I like that he has a lot of depth to him. I like that he's always after Spider-Man. He's not Robin Banks doing crazy stuff. He just wants to be the ultimate predator on the planet. And now that I'm thinking about it, a Kraven versus the Predator would be a fantastic film. I don't know how they could make that happen, but that would be cool to see. But anyway, back to Kraven the Hunter. So this movie had some potential in my mind, and then I heard they cast Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kraven the Hunter, and he's a good actor, so I thought, all right, well, all signs are pointing to the right direction. And then right before the movie came out, Sony was like, yeah, we're realizing fans aren't connecting with our villain universe, so we're going to pause the villain thing for a while, and we're going to focus solely on Spider-Man. Which is what they should have been doing all along. But that was quite a red flag going into Kraven, so I had that on my mind. And then I go see the movie, and it was just like laughably bad. There was moments in this movie, moments of dialogue in this film that were just laughably bad. The idea that Kraven is some sort of a runaway from his father and didn't want to be part of his father's gangster empire, so he runs away just so they can not give Aaron Taylor Johnson an accent was ridiculous. And then the whole film is about him coming back as an adult as this ultimate predator who's taking out different gangster friends of his father just so he can get to his father. And then along the way, he runs into the Rhino, which is an absolute CGI nightmare, especially in the face. Like, I was excited to see Rhino. Rhino's another one-off bad guy for Spider-Man that could have been a fun entry into this universe, and instead, again, the CGI was nightmare fuel. And then we get Chameleon, another fantastic Spider-Man villain that they just absolutely butcher in this film. I didn't like anything about Kraven the Hunter. I thought the dialogue was bad. I thought the execution was bad. I thought people were miscast in this film. The only one who seemed to be having a fun time was Russell Crowe, and he was barely in the film. So for me, Kraven the Hunter is the worst film that I saw in December of 2024. At number 12, we have a psychological horror film that came out in September of this year, and it is Speak No Evil. Speak No Evil stars James McAvoy as a psychopath, and honestly, that's my only positive for the movie, is that James McAvoy plays a psychopath really well. But on the negative side of this film, I have two big negatives actually. So the first one is that the trailers gave away the entire movie. Every twist, every turn was in the trailers. And usually I won't hold that against a movie, but they started playing the trailer for this film in March of 2024, and it played through September of 24 in front of every single movie. So every movie I went to see, I had the entire plot and synopsis and twist and turn and every character motivation just completely out in front of me until I finally saw this movie, and that's why I skipped it in September. I was like, well, I feel like I've already seen this thing. And sure enough, when I sat down and streamed it in December of this year, that's what I got. It was everything I knew I was going to get. Yes, there's one little twist that they don't tell you in the trailer. I won't spoil it here, but it's not worth your time. I can guarantee that. The other negative I have is that the plot, the idea of this film of psychopath people doing this to normal people, it's just been done so many times before. And so when you get to this end third act scene where the normal people are chained to the floor and they're like, why are you doing this to us? And they're like, because you let us. Maybe that was great in the original Strangers movie that came out in 2008. Maybe that mattered to me then. Maybe I saw that back then and I was like, ooh, that's creepy motivation that there's just psychopaths out there. But it's 2024. We've seen this play out so many times before that that's not a very scary concept anymore. Like, yeah, psychopaths are out there. They do crazy stuff. So even that aspect of the film felt like another trope that I'd seen time and time again. So nothing really new to add to the genre here. Speak No Evil is number 12. At number 11, guys, we have Moana 2. This is, of course, a Disney film that was supposed to be a Disney Plus series. They had filmed this entire series, episodes, to put for free on Disney Plus, and then the Disney executives were like, wait a minute, we like money. Make this a movie and put it out in theaters. And that idea seemed to work because my wife and I took our kids to go see Moana 2 in theaters, where we would have just let them watch it for free on Disney Plus. So good for the Disney execs, making a little extra money, I suppose. But that said, even if I didn't know this was supposed to be a series going into it, the movie did feel choppy, and it felt like somebody had taken a series, combined it together, and just taken out different pieces to make it fit the runtime of a normal movie. On top of that, you guys know I'm not the biggest animation fan. Even if the movie was a lot of fun and it was family friendly like this film was, to me, it's just not for me. And I understand that it's not for me, so it's never going to be a film that's going to be high up on my list. I don't even think I'd put Spider-Verse or TMNT last year at the top of any of my lists. They were fun to watch, but they're still animated movies, and I'm just not the target audience. That said, I did take my kids to see this. They enjoyed it in the theater. They laughed a lot, but since we saw it, they haven't mentioned it even once. They haven't asked, Dad, when's this coming to Disney Plus? Like they did movies like The Wild Robot. So I guess if it didn't stick with them and I'm not the target audience, that's why it's at number 11 on my list. At number 10, we have an erotic thriller and the last film that I actually watched before making this video, and it is the film Baby Girl. Baby Girl stars Nicole Kidman, Antonio Banderas, and Harris Dickinson. Nicole Kidman plays a CEO of an automation company, while Antonio Banderas plays her husband, and Harris Dickinson plays Samuel, an intern at the automation company. And right off the bat in this film, you see the power dynamic as Nicole Kidman's character sort of decides when meetings are, doesn't have time for little people. She tells the intern, all right, you can be my intern, but I don't have time for you. But she has a very submissive nature about her, and she lets that sort of slip while talking to this intern who has a very dominant nature about him. And so the power dynamic at work starts to change, and it changes outside of work as they start to have this affair where she's basically submissive in every single way to him. And that's how you get this erotic thriller, because now he kind of owns her, because he could ruin her marriage or he could ruin her life at any time. All right, so that's the synopsis of the film. What did I like or dislike about this film? Well, on the positive side, I thought the acting was done really well from both Nicole Kidman, Harris Dickinson, And I thought Antonio Banderas was the best of the bunch because he gave a great emotional performance, especially towards the end of this film, as the husband who was being cheated on. But that aside, this film feels like you put the idea and the concept into an AI generator, and this is the script that it gave you. It just felt hollow. The entire film felt like it was paint by numbers, but it was also trying to play it safe. At no point in this film did I feel like they were going too far for an R-rated movie, and that's the vibe I should have gotten from this film. I feel like this film should have been a lot darker, should have been a lot deeper. Yeah, at one point Nicole Kidman is drinking milk out of a saucer with her tongue, and you're like, oh, okay, that's kind of far, but that's as far as it ever gets. It never gets grittier, it never gets dirtier, and that's kind of what I personally wanted out of this movie. I wanted it to feel darker, I wanted it to feel grittier, almost like a Requiem for a Dream, where it starts dark, it gets worse for the characters, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it sort of ends where nothing good came for any of the main characters. And that's what I was hoping for this movie. There was even a moment towards the end where it seems like she'd kind of settled all her problems and she was in her office and she gets confronted by somebody else at work and you're like, oh, so this is never going to end for you. It's all downhill. And then they use that moment to give her an empowering woman moment. And again, just that can work in another kind of film, but her character wasn't a good character. In my opinion, her character didn't have anything to redeem by the end of this film, but they still gave her a redemption arc, and I wish they hadn't. I wish it had just gotten worse for the character. To me, that would have been darker and it would have been better. As it stands, Baby Girl is number 10. Coming in at number 9, guys, we have a monster flick called Werewolves. And Werewolves is a film that looked like it was going to be The Purge with werewolves. And just based off of that alone, I was sold. I saw this on opening day. I was actually really hyped to see it. And on the positive side, I thought the practical effects for the werewolves was a lot of fun. When you finally get to see the werewolves in all of their glory, that was fun to see. But on the negative side, I thought this movie felt rushed. This movie didn't feel thought out. It felt like they started filming before they had a finalized idea of what they wanted the werewolves to be. For instance, at the beginning of the film, they give you the impression that not everybody can turn into a werewolf. It sort of picks and chooses who turns into a werewolf with this supermoon. Sometimes you're just the unlucky person. But then about halfway through the film, they make it very clear that moonlight that touches anybody's skin turns them into werewolves, these mindless monsters. But then towards the end of the film, you can turn into a werewolf and not become a mindless monster. And I just have to wonder why. What's the difference? So with all of that being said, it feels like the movie was a great concept. I would like to spend a little more time in this world, maybe even do a first night like they did the first Purge back in the day where they went back to the original Purge where people had to figure stuff out. I'd like that. I'd like a first night of this werewolf universe because in this film, it picks up a year later at the second supermoon. So people already have an idea of how to barricade themselves in their houses and how to stay safe from these werewolves or how to stop them. There's already gangs of people gathered up. I'd like to see another entry into this universe where it's at the beginning where nobody knows people are about to turn into werewolves and then all hell breaks loose. Like that would be a lot more fun. There would be a lot more death and destruction. With that said, it's not a movie I would necessarily recommend to people unless you're just a huge werewolf fan. So Werewolves is number 9. At number 8, guys, we have Juror number 2. This is a film that came out in November in a very limited release and then immediately left theaters, but I got a chance to watch it on HBO Max in December. It is currently streaming there. And the film is a courtroom drama directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Nicholas Hoult as the title character of Juror number 2. You find out in this film that a jury gets put together. Nicholas Hoult's character is part of that jury, and this jury is now looking over a murder case where a guy supposedly threw his girlfriend off of a bridge, her head hit a rock, and she's dead. But then as the movie progresses, you find out that Nicholas Hoult's character feels it might not have been the guy that's on trial, it may actually have been him. Now, I've been told in the past that that's too much of a synopsis. That's literally what's in the trailer, so I'm sorry if that's too much for you guys. That said, I won't give away any more of the movie, but I will say that that was an interesting enough plot to make me want to watch it as soon as it hits streaming, because that's an interesting, compelling argument. Like, okay, you've got a morality issue here more than anything else. You've got a situation where, should I turn myself in? If I do, I could get 30 years to life if I get convicted, but I don't know if I actually did it, but I don't think this guy did it, so maybe I should work with the jury on acquitting this guy. And so there's a lot of back and forth in this film with his character and what he's going to do. So if you like that kind of drama, you might enjoy Juror Number 2. For me personally, this wasn't a terrible film, but I didn't like how they wrapped things up in this movie. I felt like the movie gave you a great compelling story throughout, with some great performances by Toni Collette, Kiefer Sutherland, and even J.K. Simmons shows up in this for not enough time, but some good performances throughout. But when you get to the end and they're sort of tying everything together, it's almost like they left it up to the viewer's interpretation because they wanted the viewer to sit with this moral question. And I didn't love that. I would have liked a better conclusion to this story. I said this in my quick reaction. I'll say it again here. I think the movie would have worked better as a series, maybe even a limited series where you get 6 to 8 episodes, just so they can sort of flesh out all the different people on the jury, because I felt like there were a few jury members who got way more time than other people, and just so that they could say, oh, well, all the jury had a hand in this, they'd be like, what do you think, juror number whatever? And they would be like, oh, this is my thought. And then they'd move on to somebody that you're supposed to care about in the movie. But I feel like you could have given a little bit of backstory on some of these characters a little bit better, but combining it down to a runtime of a film, in my opinion, was a bad idea. That's not to say the whole thing was bad. There were things to like about it. I think if you're a big courtroom drama fan, you'll enjoy this movie. At number 7, guys, we have the film VHS Beyond. This is the 7th entry into the found footage VHS franchise, and it's crazy that there's been 7 of these so far. Admittedly, I've only seen the first 2 VHS films. I've not seen any of the ones in between, but this one got recommended to me by one of the people commenting on my videos saying, hey, you should really check out VHS Beyond, and I'm glad I did. The way these movies work is that they have a bunch of different filmmakers create different short films, and then they combine them all into one movie, and they have an overarching narrative throughout the whole thing. So in this movie, it's called VHS Beyond, and you see a bunch of short films about potential aliens, or sometimes just straight up alien invasion movies, and then you have this overarching sort of YouTube docu-series where these guys are talking about if aliens exist or not. And to me, that was a cool twist to this VHS genre, because I don't think they've ever gone into the sci-fi genre within this franchise before. But again, maybe they have. I just haven't watched all of the movies. But that said, I had a decent enough time with VHS Beyond. There were a few of these shorts that I would watch again and again. I think they're that good. One involving a bunch of police officers trying to raid a house and save some children. Another one where there's this skydiving incident that happens. If you've seen the movie, you know which ones I'm talking about there. And then there's one that was probably the hardest one to get through, as this woman gets trapped on board of a spaceship, and as it goes into space, her body starts to rip apart because she doesn't have a suit on or anything, but then these molecules on the ship start to put her back together, and every time they put her back together, it's grosser and grosser, and then as soon as they're done putting her back together, she rips apart again. And so it's a slower moving short film, but it is intense. And to me, that was maybe the best one of the entire bunch. But just like the other VHS movies I've watched, there were some of these shorts that were just kind of dumb. One involving a woman turning people into dogs. I didn't like that one very much. I think the idea was that she was using alien tech, but if this was just thrown out onto the internet, I wouldn't have thought alien tech at all. I was just think this is kind of a weird woman turning people into animals short film. So that one didn't work for me. There were a few others that, again, I just wouldn't revisit. Maybe on a rewatch, I would skip those. But overall, would I recommend VHS Beyond? I would say if you're a fan of the franchise, or if, like me, you love found footage, then maybe this one will be for you. At number 6, guys, we have another Nicholas Hoult film on the list, and it's not the last time we're going to talk about him. This time around, we're talking about The Order. The Order is a film that stars Jude Law as an FBI agent, and it stars Nicholas Hoult as the leader of an Aryan nation group in the Pacific Northwest that's robbing banks. Jude Law gets sent up there to look for the bank robbers, and quickly discovers that it's linked to this Aryan nation group that's trying to overthrow the U.S. government. This is also based on a true story, so where the movie has some moments of action because of the bank robberies and their intense scenes sometimes, the movie also is a very slow burn of a film because they're following true events. And when you get to the third act, where in a normal fiction movie there might be a shootout or a lot of action, they're going by true events, and the true events are just very slow going. So that was kind of my only real negative for the movie, is that the movie's events play out very slowly because you're watching a true story. But on the positive side, I thought the acting was done really well from both Jude Law and Nicholas Hoult. I thought the story was compelling. Crazy that I've never heard of this story before, that the Aryan nation was building essentially an army with the money they were stealing from banks, and they thought they were going to get away with it. It's just wild to me. But that said, it's a movie I would definitely recommend if you enjoy true crime, but just make sure that you know you're in for a slow burn film. We've made it to the top 5, and at number 5, we have a Netflix film called Carry On. Carry On stars Jason Bateman as a terrorist who's trying to get a bomb through TSA security, and it stars Taron Egerton as the TSA agent that the terrorist group sort of targets to blackmail to let them put a bomb through security. So starting off with the positives, I thought that the conversation between Jason Bateman and Taron Egerton, that was the best part of this movie. And by conversation, I mean they send an earpiece to him in security, he puts it in, and then they have this conversation. For the good first act and a half of this movie, you have this conversation going between these two about will he or won't he let them put a bomb through security. They say they've got his girlfriend, they say they've got a sniper on her at all times, and that if he doesn't do what they say. And so you have this, him trying to like find ways to get a message to his boss that this is going down, but the criminals keep thwarting it. There's a lot of good back and forth between the two of them, and it reminded me of the movie Phone Booth. So if you like that movie, there's an element of that in this film that really worked for me. On the negative side, I saw people comparing this movie to the next Die Hard, and honestly, there's no comparison to be made in my personal opinion. It's not Die Hard. Yes, it's a film set around Christmas, there's Christmas music in the movie, and there's bad guys in an airport. That's it. To me, there is nowhere near any sort of comparison to the absolute classic that is Die Hard. Just want to get that out of the way. The other negatives that I have for this film, though, is that after that conversation with Bateman, there's just sort of some conveniences that happen throughout this film that really started to annoy me. Like the bad guys would pull up directly to where they needed to pull up, or the good guys would pull up directly to where they needed to pull up at the airport. And it just seemed too fake at a certain point of this film. So did I love every aspect of this movie? Absolutely not. Would I rewatch it? Maybe, but I just liked that conversation they were having. So I guess I'll end it by saying I liked the thriller element of this movie, didn't love the action aspect of this movie, but the thriller element kept me invested for the whole runtime. At number 4, guys, we have the film The 4:30 Movie. This movie came out in September of 2024 as well, and I didn't have a chance to watch it until very recently. This is a new Kevin Smith coming-of-age comedy film about a couple of teenagers who are going to try and spend the entire day at the movies. And honestly, that resonated with me so much because I was a teenager that liked to spend time at the local movie theater. And so it was cool to see these teenagers go into the theater to spend their day there. But of course, when they get there, hijinks start to happen between the group. And also one of the guys from the group has invited a girl to the 4:30 movie. And because of that, it sort of throws off their plans for the day because they were only going to pay to get into one. And then they were going to sneak around to the other showings. And they keep getting caught. They keep getting banned from the theater. And it's really just a fun back and forth between all of those characters for the runtime of the film. And honestly, that's my biggest positive for this film is the back and forth between those best friends at the movies. It reminded me a lot of me and my friends when I was a teenager going to the movies, screwing around, having a fun time. All of that worked for me. On the negative side, the love story angle or the coming of age angle of this movie, that didn't really work for me. In fact, it felt kind of jarring towards the end because you had like this bookend of a love story just filled with comedy in between, and you had Kevin Smith's regulars sort of sprinkled into the middle of this film. But when you get to the end of this movie, it's just right back to that love story, and it felt kind of jarring. It didn't feel like a very smooth transition, and I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I think if they had cut the love story portion out of this and just had a raunchy comedy with teenagers, could have been a lot better. As it stands, it's still number 4 for December. At number 3, we're going to talk about the last December released film on this list. We're also going to talk about Nicholas Hoult yet again, and that is, of course, Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. Now, if you've seen any of Robert Eggers' other horror films, they're very artistic horror. That's the best way that I can put them. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just not necessarily for everyone. I put out a full review for this movie, and the comments on that review were very mixed. There were people saying I fell asleep, I hated this film, other people telling me that I didn't even understand how great it was, even though I pretty much said nothing but positive things about it. I will say this, on the positive side, the visuals in this film are beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Robert Eggers can truly paint a beautiful picture with his films. I really believe that. I can say that about all of his films. He does it yet again in this movie. It feels like you're watching a movie that was filmed in this century, which is nice, instead of a black and white silent film, or even a black and white Bela Lugosi 1931 Dracula. like it feels like it's updated for the times, and I appreciated that. Also, a lot of the performances in this movie were really well done. I thought that Lily Rose Depp did a great job in her role, even though I've seen mixed reactions on that. I was just having a conversation with somebody yesterday who said she just felt kind of bland. For me, I thought she worked in that role, but to each their own. And of course, we talked about Nicholas Hoult at the beginning of this. It is another Nicholas Hoult release in this year. Good for him, getting some work. And he is the one that is sent to Nosferatu's castle to bring back Count Orlok and make a land deal with him. But of course, that's not what's going down. It's actually a sinister game because Count Orlok is trying to get closer to his wife, played by Lily Rose Depp. So there's a little bit of a sinister game at play there. There's a lot of positives is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of good things to say about Nosferatu. But in my opinion, and this is just personally my opinion, this movie didn't break any new ground. Yes, it updated the story of Nosferatu. The only Nosferatu we had had before this was a black and white silent film. Sure. But now we have an updated version of it, and what were they going to do differently? And really, it was nothing. The movie is very slow going in the first act because it's building all of that tension, all of that dread, something Robert Eggers does really well. But when you get to the third act, I was hoping for something more. I'm not saying it had to be an all-out action scene, anything like that, but I was hoping for a twist or something different. But unfortunately, you never really get that twist. You never get anything different. It's just the same story played out for today's audiences. And for some people, that really worked. There were a lot of people that loved this film. And for them, great job. I'm glad you enjoyed it. For me, I just wanted something more out of it. So I'd love to say this is my number one movie for December of 2024, but it's not. This is my number 3 movie. It's in the top 3. It's a good film. It's well made, but I just wanted more out of the plot myself. Coming in at number 2 is one of my favorite films I've seen this year, and it's only beaten out by probably my favorite film we'll get to in a minute. But at number 2, we have the film Dee Dee. And Dee Dee came out in July of this year. I think it came out the same weekend as Deadpool, and I just completely ignored it. Because not only did I enjoy Deadpool that weekend, but I also enjoyed the film Oddity that weekend, and I was like, all right, I don't have time for whatever Dee Dee is. But I watched it on streaming recently, and Dee Dee is an absolutely beautiful film about a teenage boy who's going, I think, from 8th grade to freshman year in high school. I think it's his last summer before he gets to high school. So he's still kind of a kid. He's becoming sort of a older teenager at the same time. All his friends are super immature. He likes girls, and girls haven't really ever paid any attention to him. And so the film is kind of him playing out that last summer with his friends, making new friends, kind of getting away from his old friends, finding a girl that he's interested in that's also interested in him. And what this movie does so well is they use social media from the early 2000s, because this film is set in the early 2000s. And so my favorite aspect of this film, the thing that made me really latch on to this movie, was I was about that age in the early 2000s as well. And it's everything that was the early 2000s as far as social media goes. They played into it perfectly, whether it was being able to message people and sort of manipulate them. In those days, you could go to a Facebook page or a MySpace wall, look at everything that they have listed, find their favorite movies, find their favorite music, and then you could pretend you enjoyed that stuff, or you could actually start to enjoy that stuff yourself, and then that would make you connect with them. And they play into that so damn well. It's also the beginning of social media, so people talking shit online versus talking shit in person was a very weird moment in time, because you could say stuff to people online, but when they caught you in public, it was different. And that's kind of how this movie plays out too, because if people say stuff to each other online, they kind of get away with it. But then in person, Dee Dee doesn't let that slide. And I really liked that aspect of this film. So it's very much so a coming of age film for this Dee Dee character, but overall, I thought that it was beautiful. It was very emotional. It was set in a time period that really resonated with me. So Dee Dee is my number 2 film for December of 24. All right, guys, we made it to number 1, my favorite movie of December 2024, and one of my favorite movies of the entire year, and it is the film Anora. Anora originally came out in October of 24, and then it went to a wide release in November, and I finally had a chance to watch it in December of 24, and it is another absolutely beautiful, emotional film. The movie kind of ranges on the emotions. It starts as a romance film between this exotic dancer who meets this young Russian guy, and he starts paying her for dances, then he starts paying her for sex, and then he starts paying her to just be his girlfriend for a week, and one thing leads to another. They start to fall in love with each other, or she thinks they start to fall in love with each other, and he marries her in Vegas. Now, he's a very wealthy Russian young adult, and his parents live in Russia, so they really have no say over his life, so he just marries her. But one thing leads to another, the parents find out, and they're pissed off about it, and so they're flying from Russia to America to make sure this marriage gets annulled, and that's where the movie takes a sharp turn into comedy, and it is almost, I say a sharp turn, but honestly, it's a seamless transition from this romance film into this comedy film, because while the parents are on their way, they send a bunch of their Russian guys to their house to sort of hold them there, and that's where the comedy really starts to come into play, because the Russian young man runs away, so Nora's trapped with these guys, she starts breaking their noses. It's really funny. It's hard to explain, you kind of just have to experience it, but I'm telling you, it's hilarious. And then when they finally all get on the same page to go look for this Russian boy and find out where he ran away to, it's more comedy after more comedy. There's even a scene with a tow truck that is absolutely hilarious. I loved every minute of this film. And then when you get to the end, there's another seamless transition into a different tonal shift of the film, where you go from romance to comedy to an absolute emotional gut punch where you feel terrible for this character of Honora. Like at the beginning of this film, you're just kind of like, all right, she's kind of getting what she gets. But by the end of this film, you feel so horrible for her. You realize she doesn't know what real love is. People have been taking advantage of her for her whole life. And it's beautiful, but it's heartbreaking at the same time, and I loved everything about it. So Honora is my #1 film for December of 2024. For all of those reasons, I highly recommend you guys check it out. And that, guys, is my list of movies ranked from December of 2024 from worst to best. Have you seen any of these movies? If you have, let me know in the comment section down below. And like I said at the beginning of the video, if you've got a list of movies that you watched in December, they don't all have to be from December. If you saw movies from other months this year, that's totally fine. Throw those in the comment section as well. Let me know what you watched. Finally, guys, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Guys, we got to the end of my December 2024 ranked from worst to best video. I love making these. I've made one for every month this year, so if you're a fan of this channel and you haven't watched some of the other ranked videos that I've done, well, I'll put a whole playlist of my best and worst of 2024 right there, and I'll put my entire playlist for my 2024 movie reviews right there. Oh, and one other thing, I know I said at the beginning of this video, if you're looking for the top 10 best and worst of the year, I promise they're on the way.